both remotely and also in person, and will be filmed and recorded for live and subsequent broadcasts available through the Council's website. The Council is a data controller under the General Data Protection Regulations and the Data Protection Act 2018. We broadcast and record council meetings to fulfil our public trust obligation to enable members of the public to observe the democratic process. Data collected during the process will be retained in accordance with council published policies available through the council's website. Members of the council are reminded that they should follow the council's established meeting protocols, including around use of the chat facility, and that comments made in the chat facility are visible to all participants in the meeting, which may include members of the public who have also received invites to the meeting. And we've also got an observer joining us today from the Care Inspectorate, so just to let people know that Stephen Rankin's in the room with us today as well. So I'll hand over to Diane. Thank you for item 1, apologies, substitutions and declarations of interest.
Chair, we have apologies from Provost Mackenzie and also Councillor Armstrong with Councillor Curley substituting. We'll now move to a roll call before asking for the declarations of interest. Can the following members please indicate if they're present at the meeting either in person or remotely? Councillor Brennan.
Present in person.
Councillor Brooks.
In chamber.
Councillor Cassidy.
Present remotely.
Councillor Curley.
Present chambers.
Councillor Daisley.
Present remotely.
Councillor Jackson.
In the chamber.
Councillor Law.
Present remotely.
Councillor Moran.
In the chamber.
Councillor McCabe.
Present chamber.
Councillor Robertson.
Present remotely.
Are there any declarations of interest?
Okay, thanks very much. So warm welcome to everybody here today. And then we're on to item number 2, which is a presentation, and I think it's Kate. Maxine's going to take us through that. Thanks very much, Maxine.
Thank you. So as we've worked through the decommissioning programme board, there were a number of concerns and questions that were coming up, particularly around our third sector partners. So this was actually a presentation that we delivered to the third sector resilience network that we thought might be helpful in bringing here, just to sort of answer any questions, but just to evidence the level of engagement that we've got with our third sector partners throughout this work as well. Okay, Diana, are we okay to? Moving on to the first slide, concern. So this was really just to inform and reassure partners about the closure and transition to the community-based model. We certainly acknowledge the vital contributions of third sector organisations in the new homelessness support model, and we were really keen to use the Resilience Network meeting as an opportunity to draw in more of that support, that third sector support, in terms of going up and beyond what we're already doing, if you like, to make sure that we're successful in achieving our outcomes. The closure of the Inverclyde Centre is planned for the end of January 2026, but as some of you may well know, that there is going to be some slight delay in that now as a result of some delays with the out of hours model. And that's likely to be planned now for middle to the end of February. However, that will not hold us back in terms of closing down the Inverclyde Centre. We are currently have out of 24 rooms in the Inverclyde Centre, we've only got 5 open just now, and that's just a decommissioning process that's been happening throughout December, and will continue through to the end of January. We've got 2 rather sort of complex situations in there that may take us a little bit longer, but we will definitely have all of those rooms empty by the end of January. The role of the programme board really was to encourage transparency, feedback and multi-agency collaboration for smooth transition and service user support. We've really been able to see the benefit of that as we've had our multi-agency partners round the table collaborating with us to talk about some of their concerns. So I'll give you an example. As most of you will know, the Inverclyde Centre has been regularly used by, for example, Police Scotland when people have got complex needs out of hours. So we were really keen to work alongside them to think about how they're going to support those sort of people out of hours. So we've had some really good conversations with Police Scotland about that so far. And it's also about making sure that we just don't move the issue from one inappropriate placement to another inappropriate placement. So those conversations are ongoing. So just to give you some reassurance around that as well. So thinking about why change is needed, it was originally 30 hostel style rooms and 50 community-based furnished flats. That was in January 23. We were not achieving good outcomes for the people who were using our services. We had lengthy stays in temporary accommodation. As at January 2023, if you were resident in the Inverclyde Centre, you could be expected to remain there on average for 123 days before you were then moved on to temporary accommodation and then moved on again to permanent accommodation. So as you can imagine, the lack of stability across that process was a real challenge for us, given the vulnerability of the people we were supporting. If you were, when you did move into a temporary accommodation, you were likely on average to be in the temporary accommodation for 245 days. Now, my maths is no great, but that's around about a year in total that we would have a lack of stability in terms of tenancies. So we knew that needed to change. There was exposure to risk as a direct result of people residing in the Inverclyde Centre, and I don't think I need to go into in detail what some of those risks were. And we also had a high rate of repeat homelessness presentations, and that was as a result of we were using all of our resource to manage the Inverclyde Centre. So we had little to no resource left over to do that early intervention and prevention. And the challenges that we were facing in the Inverclyde Centre meant that resource that we did have put aside for support was constantly being consumed by the challenges in the Inverclyde Centre. So that was just some of the reasons why we focused on the need for change. So looking at what we are intending moving forward and really thinking about how that fits with our current strategic plans and strategic objectives. And the Rapid Rehousing Transition Plan really is intended to reduce the amount of time people are in temporary accommodation, prevent them from needing it in the first place. But if they do have to go into that model, really shortening the amount of time that they're in that temporary transition phase. To reduce the period of time people experience homelessness. We've integrated our asylum and refugee support services with our homelessness services as well. And that is really to give us a much fairer and equitable service in terms of meeting the needs of everyone who presents as homeless in Inverclyde, irrespective of their background. We recognised that there was a level of inequity depending on whether you were which route pathway you were coming through, whether you were coming through the asylum and refugee pathway or whether you were presenting, for example, to the Inverclyde Centre as being homeless, and that was purely based on the funding routes that we get for both of those pathways. So it's really inequitable. So we have integrated both of those services. It gives us scalability around some of that as well. And it gives us a much better experience and skill mix across the team that we can deliver support in the community. The new service will absolutely adhere to the SHORE standards and MAPA protocols for justice individuals and the support that they require. There's been, you'll know that the early release programmes that have been operating, certainly homelessness has experienced quite a significant impact as a result of those early release programmes. So we need to be above and beyond our SHORE standards. We need to make sure that we've got the capacity to be able to manage some of that as well. And Previously, our RSLs are really engaged in this process and they're really committed to supporting our aims and objectives. So we have really made some improvements in terms of the annual lettings that we expect from them to support homelessness. And we've now got those sitting at around 25 to 30% of lets to support our homelessness households annually. So we were operating in a financial environment that had a £1.4 million budget per annum, and we were regularly spending £500,000 over and above what was in our budget. Now that was mainly in relation to temporary posts that had been put in to support the rapid rehousing transition projects a number of years ago and had never been taken back out. So it was time for us to really think about reviewing the overall broader model. And the reason it was so expensive was because we were operating that hybrid model where we were doing the rapid rehousing transition work and using our resource to facilitate the use of a hostel style accommodation. So we've obviously had a look at the numbers and the spend against some of that, and it's actually much more cost effective to deliver all of that collectively in the community without the Inverclyde Centre as a fixed resource. And we were noticing high impact on staff wellbeing. We had a lot of absences and a lot of vacancies. And again, that was as a result of, a direct result of the challenges that staff were facing almost on a daily basis in terms of violence and aggression in the Inverclyde Centre and the conditions that they were working under. So we had high agency and overtime use that was contributing to that £500,000 overspend. And so that agency and overtime use meant that there was a lack of consistency in terms of the delivery of support for the people who did need to use the centre. So what are we going to be doing that's different? So again, the Inverclyde Centre will close by January 2026. Let's assume that that's going to be February 2026 now. And moving from hostel accommodation to community-based housing. Our furnished flats will increase from 55 to at least 85 units, which will offer dignified, integrated temporary housing. The new support teams, the integrated support teams, will provide person-centred support and assistance to prevent homelessness. And for those people who do face homelessness, to make sure that that journey is as short and stable as possible. And it will be delivered alongside an out-of-hours continuous support model. So there'll be no change in terms of, although the Inverclyde Centre will close, for those who present as genuinely homeless, there will be no change in terms of how we support that out-of-hours. We are also undertaking a scoping exercise just now to look at digital tools to deliver tailored 24/7 support to service users as well. So for those people who need, who might have a greater degree of complexity, they don't always want a presence of us in their homes. So there are better options to be able to support people where physical presence is not required, which allows us to support the most vulnerable people in the community with the resource that we do have. Skip the page. So Glasgow City Council have been commissioned and they already provide our out-of-hours support to other HSCP areas, and they will now be taking on our out-of-hours homeless presentations and the assessments of those. We will share our daily temporary accommodation availability to Glasgow by the end of each working day. So there will always be 2 properties every evening for use for out of hours. They will have key safes attached to them. Glasgow City will have the codes for those key safes, and people will be able to allow themselves into those properties where it's out of hours. And Glasgow will send us the initial presentation assessment the following morning by 9 AM, and we'll have somebody out to that person that next day. So the next working day, we'll have somebody out to do a full assessment in terms of their needs. Out of hours will run from 5 p.m. till 9 a.m. the next morning, when our duty team will take over and take forward any presentations from the previous evening, and make contact, as I said, the next working day to assess longer term need. So this is the important bit. All of that is about the mechanics of how we're doing it and what we're doing. This is the important bit in terms of what it means for people, so the why we're doing it and what we intend to have people, how we intend to improve people's experience. So we're able to provide a model that's dignified, person-centred, in a safer and integrated accommodation settings. Reduce stigma and isolation by providing furnished flats. We compared to traditional hostel style living, where that's communal living, and limited access to essential facilities such as, you know, washing machines, all of those sorts of things that support people's dignities. Access to wraparound services. Individuals will gain better access to mental health, addiction and social care services, because our support planning will be person-centred in the community. And we will consider digital solutions for everybody that we support, where that's needed, to enhance safety and responsiveness. So what we know is already working. The tenancy support model, we've been sort of working a bit of a hybrid model for quite some time now, trying to move some of that support resource over to the community as we close beds in the Inverclyde Centre. So, and that support model has improved tenancy sustainment and increased prevention efforts significantly. It has prison liberations, hospital discharges and RSL outreach have strengthened service delivery. Our interagency collaboration has improved. We've got stronger links with Community Mental Health Team, ADRS and Youth Scotland for a more holistic support plan. The average stay at the Inverclyde Centre has reduced from 123 days to 54 days, showing significant efficiency gains, but also making sure that people's experiences are much improved. Housing First is a programme to provide settled accommodation to individuals with multiple and complex needs that will often have a history of homelessness. Sorry, I think I've... Is it me or is it you, Diane?
I think it was this.
Is it you?
No blaming me.
Right, thanks. It combines settled housing with flexible support to help people maintain their tenancies with a focus on preventing homelessness. Currently, we're supporting 33 households in temporary accommodation and permanent tenancies using Housing First principles. We've maintained a 97% tenancy sustainment rate, which is far higher than the Scottish average. So thinking about the role of our third sector partners, we recognise that our third sector are working with people in our communities already that may not be sort of on our radar, if you like, and there's a real role for them in terms of early intervention and prevention to be asking those probing questions about people's tenancies and about their housing situation, to be able to support them in the first instance to prevent homelessness, but then also to make early referrals to our homelessness and advice services where there is an imminent risk of homelessness, so that we can prevent that. It presents an opportunity to co-create integrated, accessible service pathways with our third sector partners. And at the Resilience Network, there were so many really good ideas and opportunities that were flying around the room that day. So we will take a number of them forward to further support some of this. Partners join a multi-agency working group to ensure expertise is recognised and utilised effectively, and that's really back to our programme board that's multi-agency, to make sure that we are absolutely dotting our I's and crossing our T's, that we don't miss anything and that no opportunities for shared learning are missed as well. We have an enhanced support system by using our third sector support partners to build a resilient system, meeting diverse needs and ensuring continuity of care. So again, that's also about, you know, when we are working with people in our communities that might have a level of complexity, there's not always a continued role for us, but in order to maintain and sustain that support and that consistent improvement, then we quite often involve our third sector partners to provide some of that follow-on support for us. So we had, further to the presentation, we had some really good discussions and conversations, and the room was really quite busy. So I was really pleased that we've got full engagement in this project and this plan from our third sector partners. We know from the programme board that we've got multi-agency support of the programme moving forward, and there's a number of initiatives that we will take forward that will simply, escalate the benefits of this even further. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks so much, Maxine. That's really good to get all that practical detail there in that presentation. I think that's really helpful, and a clearer picture of how it's actually going to work and how it's working just now, and most importantly, what it means for people in that slide there. That I know yesterday we had the IJB and a lot of discussion about it there, and I think the headlines were it's just a very slight delay. All things going well, and that phase transition's been really important in the careful working with partners. So it's great to get even more information there today. I'll go to Councillor Brooks first, and then I know that Councillor Waugh's got her hand up online as well. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much. Fantastic report. It's good to see things moving forward. It's been a long time coming, I would suggest, but it's good to see where we are. So 3 questions on a bit clarity, and then there's a 4th question on different subject. Digital tools, a scoping exercise. To me, there's so much to be done. So why are we scoping now? Why is it not part? What are we behind the 8 ball? Should we have been doing scoping before this? So something present, that's question 1. Question 2, something presents on Friday 5 PM. Am I correct in assuming what you said there? We won't engage with them until Monday 9 AM. And if that is the case, it's a long time to be on your own if it was a mental health issue. Is there anything that could happen that weekend from our service? Or literally are they left on their own for 40 hours? Furnished flat, can you help me understand what a furnished flat is? Is it literally everything they need, or is it a bed and a sofa? So that's a clarity on your report, and I suppose a question that's slightly off key. Amongst some of the board of an RSL, it's not been mentioned, so there's no point for me to make a declaration. But an RSL is to evict with obviously the court to obviously evict someone. They would immediately present homeless and go back into the cycle that you've just presented, go into RSL tenancy. I would just like to help me understand how that works.
That's a complicated one, depending on circumstances, but I'll do my best to give you a sort of broad generic response to that. So in the new model, what we would hope is that we are preventing RSLs from feeling the need to get to the point for eviction. Okay, that's the whole point of this. Where an RSL is experiencing challenges with one of their tenants, whether that be in terms of rent payments or antisocial behaviour or any of those things, we've now got a process in place where there's early indicators of some of those issues, and we would be getting involved to provide support. But that's not taking away from some of the RSL responsibility around this, because they have their own sort of community connector type roles where they've got a role to go in and engage. Not all of them have got community connectors, but they've got a role to go in and engage with their tenants to try and mitigate some of those challenges before they arise. Now, if it goes beyond the scope of the RSL, then absolutely that's where we would want to be stepping in. Right now, we step in once the eviction notice has been provided. So you're right, they just come right back through that cycle again. So that meets nobody's needs whatsoever. So what we're asking our RSL partners, and they're quite happy and forward thinking around what they're doing, is that the minute that starts to become problematic around some of those issues, that we're having almost a bit of an MDT meeting, that we are getting ourselves round the table and saying, how can we support this person? How can we make sure that this person stays in this tenancy? And you don't have, because it's an expense to evict people as well, you don't have the expense of evicting someone, and we are not having oversight of that whole landscape of available properties. What's available properties, what's permanent, what's temporary, you know, looking at that whole landscape across Inverclyde, really complex. So if we have people moving in and out of tenancies more often than we need, that becomes more complex. So we want to sustain people in their communities in those tenancies. So hopefully that answers that one. In terms of the digital scoping, you're right. We probably maybe could have been doing this a little bit earlier, but as you said, this has been a long time coming and it's been a really complex bit of work. And I think we're kind of in the position just now where it's dependent on individual needs as we come across them. We've got a good broad understanding of what digital opportunities are out there. So as we come across people and think that digital solutions are the best, then we're prioritising them first and foremost, I suppose. In terms of the out of hours, so if somebody presents on a Friday at 5 o'clock out of hours and there are concerns for the welfare of that person over the weekend, then Glasgow City also provide our social work out of hours response as well. So there's a joined up approach there whereby the person wouldn't just be left, they would be the same as anybody else who needed out of hours support, because Glasgow provide that for us as well.
A furnished flat.
Oh, sorry.
What is a furnished flat?
Oh, what's
Is
included?
a kettle, a cup of tea, you know?
No, fully furnished. So so it's, you know, bedding, sofa, kettles, microwave, cooker, washing machine, you know, they're all carpeted, everything is included. So we are really hoping that we keep people in them as short a time as possible, because what that also means is the shorter amount of time people are in them, the less likely we will have to replace some of the bigger white goods, etc., etc. But then you've also run the risk of the more people you've got going through, the more likely that you are to. But it's all covered, everything.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much for those really full answers. It's Councillor Law online and then Councillor McCabe and Curley in the room. Councillor Law.
Thanks, Francesca. My question has pretty much already been covered. I had some communications with members of the public who were concerned that moving the issue into sort of residential areas could create potential for antisocial behaviour problems for neighbours and things. So, but as I said, most of the question had just been asked, but they just wanted reassurance that that would be taken into consideration as part of the support for these folk.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor Law. I think Maxine will just say a few words about that. Actually, thanks.
Yeah, so there's two things to think about with this. If we can expect a reduction in the amount of antisocial behaviour people experience because we're providing tailored support. So we're identifying people's needs and we're meeting people's needs, which is likely to reduce the antisocial behaviour. Right now, if you think about it, the level of antisocial behaviour in terms of the Inverclyde Centre is beyond what you will see in communities, because we are not putting 10 TFFs in one street. You know, we are strategically thinking about where these temporary furnished flats are. We are not collecting them or clumping them all together where we're likely to create the opportunity and the environment for antisocial behaviour. We're being really strategic about where these are being placed, and the fact that they will have tailored support means that we are likely to reduce. We can never say that you're not going to get antisocial behaviour. We don't have that kind of control over how people behave in any given circumstances, but all of the mitigations are in place with this model.
Thank you. Councillor McCabe.
Yeah, thanks. Obviously, it's good to see the progress today in terms of the Housing First, and I think it would be useful as 12 months from now, but whatever time, to get an update report and how it progressed. I think we're all glad that the Inverclyde sector is finally going to close and move to this new model. But to me, looking at the sort of the target of 25 to 30% of lets going to homeless, that does seem to me is to be a challenge. Certainly based on my professional experience, it doesn't always transpire that you actually can meet those sort of targets. And we know that there are huge pressures on the housing system within Inverclyde as there are across the country, but we also know that there are areas of low demand, type of properties of low demand, so actually being able to, I suppose, get 25-30% less to homeless people and actually fill those tenancies, I think will be a challenge, and I think it is important to have that ongoing sort of review in terms of how we're doing, but obviously I would like to see it being successful, but I just think there will be challenges around it.
Thanks, Maxine.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that there are challenges ahead in any model, but in this model, if you think about it though, 25-30% for the likes of clock housing is going to be very different to 25-30% of what Riverclyde Homes provides, just because of the size and scale of their stock, their available stock. So it is really about making sure the challenge for us. So I'll give you another bit of information. So we have our annual performance meeting with the Scottish Housing Regulator every year, usually in December, and we are streets ahead in terms of the national picture in loads of different areas. There are two areas that we need to focus our attention on in the next 12 months, and I'm really quite focused on these, and that is reducing the amount of time in temporary accommodation, and mind blank, just forgot the other one. It'll come to me. So part of that is really managing that estate really well. So the void turnovers are our biggest challenge. So getting the RSLs to turn those voids over quickly can be a real challenge for us, because then we have to go back in and fit them out to make sure that they're up to standard as a temporary furnished flat. So what we intend to do with, where possible, is if somebody's put into temporary accommodation, flip them. So that just means that rather than then moving them on to another permanent accommodation, if that person's settled in the temporary accommodation, we then create a permanent tenancy for them in that property, which means that we then need to pull another temporary property back through. That reduces our void times significantly by doing that. So if we do that enough times throughout the year, those targets should be achievable. There are some, you talked as well about some of the challenges. We've got some really good case studies so far of some of the people that we've supported in terms of the achievements that we've had with them. And I'd be happy to bring some examples of the case studies and, as you said, some progress reports about our annual performance around some of the data that we've got.
Thanks very much. Kate, you're wanting to say a few words on that, and then I know.
It was just to start, because this probably predates Maxine coming into post, but one of the learning that we had around when we started the review was the relationship between the housing contribution statement, the IGB, and the registered social landlords. And if you remember, Jim came along that did the review from the City of Glasgow and was very clear that the starting point lay around the governance to write to the RSLs, and because they've got statutory duty in this space to provide us with the accommodation that we are required. So that's something that we haven't done as an HSCP IGB, and it's something that we will be doing. If we heard our partners RSLs will tell us, no, we're fine, we'll be able to deliver it, but it's good governance that when we move into this space that we will put out a letter to all registers with our expectations around the delivery model, and we'll be able to kind of provide a much stronger governance about what is actually delivered, as opposed to doing it in a very informal way. I am absolutely assured, because even at the IGB yesterday, Stephen McLaughlin was there, and we've got the absolute commitment with our registered social landlords across the beats to help us in this space. And that is great news to us, but I think we just need to do the due diligence.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Just a late declaration. So, Robert, as it's been now been mentioned by name, I'm not director on the board of Riverclyde Homes, so just a late declaration to legal.
Thanks very much. And I'm also a member of the board of River Clyde Homes as well. Councillor Curley.
I'm going to have to do that in April straight. Just on thank you very much for the presentation. I think you've answered one of my points was about flipping the properties. So effectively, the 85 properties we've got, are these really not the same 85 properties all the way through? So in the case of moving them around, is the intention really that we're trying to flip as many of these properties as possible for so that we actually getting sustainable tenancies? Because I know that in some situations, obviously, if you say you've only 2 properties that are free on a given night, it's not necessarily going to be a property that would meet the allocation policy of the RSL, for instance, if that's the only property that's available. So there might be a bit of under occupancy and things like that. So obviously the intention is to try and make sure people get in the home and get sustainable, but sometimes that might not be possible. So it's obviously a bit of a fluid situation.
Yeah, so the emergency accommodation is exactly that. It's emergency accommodation. It is 1-2 nights, you know, and that's how we will use those properties as an interim measure to keep people safe off the streets and keep them safe until we are able to carry out a full assessment and then move them on to appropriate temporary accommodation. In terms of long-term objectives, I mean, I would love it if we got ourselves to a position where we only need 10 temporary accommodations across our whole estate, because we've got so good at the early intervention and prevention. We've got so good at our community capacity building models in terms of supporting communities, you know, to empower communities that we get to a position where homelessness almost becomes something that's a rarity, because the access to services around this prevents people from getting to that point. Until such times, the flipping of properties is, right now, it's probably the exception to the rule, because by the very nature of temporary furnished flats, the person's not selecting where they want to live. You know, it's an emergency accommodation, so they are placed somewhere. By the very nature of that means that it will be very rare that we get that right first time round for somebody. So that then means that we have to move them on to somewhere that's meets their needs greater or is of more to their preference. But occasionally we get people moved into temporary accommodations where they say, yeah, this will not be for me. And 2 weeks later they say, this is perfect. So it is about, for those people whose needs it meets, it's about saying should not be the exception to the rule. Where this person is settled, we will flip this property and we'll pull another one in. What that also does is, as you said, and I don't know how to, the terminology is maybe recycle our temporary estate so that it's not in the same place in the same streets all the time as well.
Thanks very much. Thank you. Councillor Moran.
I thank you. I mean, this is a good report. It's quite a while to get here, but Martin did a fantastic job. Councillor mentioned the word stigma there, which is a word that we can use, but we know what it means. And certainly, the people who find themselves homeless, for various reasons, they're not all homeless. Some people, it's just financial reasons they find themselves in that position, or maybe they've just come out of prison, whatever. And I know that RSLs are making a big player, they're there to help us, and I hope they do. But in the past, we would not just been as helpful. And I can assure you, the usual cases where people were put us with a Friday afternoon in a back here, home centre, and Monday morning, because it was the wrong place, wrong time. We live in a community here in Aberdeen, and everyone seems to know everyone else, and that's just the way it is. And I think when we put people in temporary accommodation, we do take the right step to make sure we're putting them in the right place at the right time, in the right position. But if we don't do that, we won't end up back in the centre, because it'll be the wrong fit. And I think we went a lot of work to get where we are, and we want to keep going down that road that we were going. But at the end of the day, the proof will be the pudding, you know, usually when the centre shut, then we should do the real benefits of not having that place. I visited it on one occasion with you yourself, not really a great love for that place. The sooner it shuts the better, in my opinion. But the same token, what kind of place is to fit for purpose? And we have to put people where they fit, and not because it suits the ourselves.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Jackson.
Yeah, thanks, thank you, Neil.
again, with else, I welcome these changes. We've talked a lot in here about dignity, support and compassion. I think this will certainly provide the means to support people. But it's another policy change and the change we made is we need to take the public with us. And my concern is my own experience and ourselves and the social behaviour for ourselves to try and have people elected. But they have concerns about the people, the neighbours who are going to have, you're going to expect a lot from neighbours. A lot of times was that social behaviour, these neighbours probably up 6 months a year of hell. I've got one case at a minute where, without getting into detail, where between the times of midnight, 6 o'clock in the morning, there's 27 visits, 18 visitors a night, and that's very common. It has been going on for about 6 months in a stop time. They themselves, the way they've been asked to secure the property because they're getting broken into and they've not been helping. So my fear is when we put people into these properties, if there's any, a lot of people are going to get in. I understand that what we're saying, not everybody who presents themselves as homeless is listed a chaotic lifestyle. But again, we've got to admit a lot of do. There's drug and there's alcohol abuse, and a lot of these flats end up getting used for drug taking, for cooking, all the things are in there. And when you take somebody out of the homeless centre and you put them into a flat, we are going to expect a lot of the neighbours to put up with potential antisocial behaviour, and I do have concerns. I suppose we'd like to ask what communication or what have they done to speak to people what's what happened, and people come from the homeless centre and become their neighbours. Have we spoke to the public? Have we went out wider? I know we've engaged with ourselves with different agencies, but you aren't asking an awful lot of the general public to accept this model and look at this model. And there might be interventions to do one thing which helps sustain the tenancy of somebody who maybe their first few can run in there are the best of neighbours. So that's my concern.
Thanks, Councillor Jackson. Maxine.
So in terms of engagement, we've had quite a lot of discussions at our locality planning groups around some of these issues, exactly that, our agendas have been taken over at times by members of the public wanting reassurance around some of this. And we are confident that we have got appropriate mitigations in place. However, what I would say is that people are focused on the temporary furnished flats. So if somebody presents as homeless and we didn't have temporary furnished flats and we were just putting people straight into permanent tenancies, it would be the same people in the same streets in the same tenancies. People are focused on the fact that this is a TFF, what used to be called, people are, and I correct them all the time, scatter flats. They are not, they are temporary furnished flats. So we need to support the public in moving away from the understanding that by the very nature of a temporary furnished flat, they are going to get any different challenges from the same people who might be in that flat next door to them, and it might be a permanent tenancy that they have. So that's the challenge that we need to work through with people. And we also need to think about personal accountability and responsibility. If people are behaving in an antisocial behaviour way, an antisocial way, then there are criminal ramifications around that. There are challenges around. So we do need to hold people to account. However, the model that we are proposing is where we would hope that in a dignified and compassionate way, as you describe, that we are able to almost have a bit of a crystal ball around that and understand what might be some of the challenges that might come some people's way and intercept in advance of that and do that support with the people. And we always make sure that people understand what their responsibilities are going into a tenancy, whether that's temporary or permanent. If you behave in a way that is inappropriate or, cause harm or anything else, then the likelihood is that you will be evicted. So people do need to take some personal responsibility and accountability for that. But I think my main piece of advice would be to shift people away from the focus of the fact that this is a temporary accommodation, because that would be the same people in the same properties. In terms of working with the public moving forward, I'm happy to engage, because the last thing we want is for us, our plans to be derailed because we haven't done enough in terms of engaging with the public. I think we've had lots of discussions around our locality planning groups, but I'm more than happy to do more of that if that's what's felt needed.
Okay, thanks very much, thank you.
Just if I could come in that point, in terms of these temporary tenancies, the primary responsibility to support these tenancies surely falls on your service rather than the RSL.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's important, as you've outlined in that presentation, that the appropriate services engaged to support the individuals in addressing any particular issues that they have.
Yeah, absolutely. Whilst they're in that temporary accommodation, their support needs are our responsibility to assess and deliver those support needs. I have spoke about personal responsibility, and those things need to sit side by side. We need to understand where vulnerability sits, and we need to address vulnerability and risk, and that includes risk to the person and risk to the broader communities as well. And we would always look at a whole range of supports that are available. We've got an amazing support team in the housing options service, and they are building a level of almost a repertoire of skills and things that can be delivered, quite creative things to try and divert some of these challenges already. So I think as we progress over the next 12 months, we'll see some real improvements there as well.
Thank you. Thanks. Yeah, sure.
I suppose Maxine talks about it from the benefits of our own service, but as the Chief Officer, the benefits of us integrating homelessness more into an integrated service delivery model, the opportunities are greater than they were when it was in the Inverclyde Centre, because we were managing the outputs of institutional care as opposed to looking at the opportunities to develop people's capacity to change. Now that isn't always possible for everyone, but because it's much more integrated, including we brought our refugees and asylum into that mix, the capacity that we've now got in that service, whilst bringing it into financial balance, is significant, and it gives us the opportunities to do much more prevention downstream, and that's what we hope. So it's about tenancy sustainment as well, when RSLs identify that being problematic. Margaret and I had that discussion about where our care experience sit. Within that, the same principles should be extended to young people, because the danger is we try and treat them differently and they want a place to live and feel secure. So this will be evolving in terms of our support and how we support people through our integrated teams, particularly mental health and addictions. At times have sat to the left or right of this, and they haven't been integral to the delivery.
Thanks very much for that, Kate. And yeah, and obviously in terms of that message and the messages going out there, there's work that we can all do as representatives in our communities too, I think. But no, listen, I think that discussion on that really important issue and change and development is really, really welcome, and thanks so much for all your really thorough and detailed responses. I think everybody's got a really clear picture there. So we've not got any action to do with the presentation, but I'm sure we're all noting it for ourselves. Okay, and that takes us on to item number 3, which I think is Craig taking us through the revenue and capital budget report. Thanks, Craig.
Okay, thank you very much to yourself, Chair. This is a standard finance paper that we've been followed the cycle and covers a number of main areas. It covers the period 7 projected 25-26 outturn at this point, our current capital and reserves position. So, as at period 7, we're currently projecting an overspend of £811,000 in the social care budget. For completeness and transparency, the health part of the HSCP budget is showing a £1.13 million underspend at period 7 also, and this gives a total partnership underspend of £319,000. However, this report focuses mainly on the social care element of the budget, and I'll now give a bit more detail on that. There are a number of other underspends within the overall budget, The main driver for the total overspend is due to the Children and Families budget projecting a £3.481 million overspend, and this is mainly due to residential placements and child respite overspends at period 7. This forms part of the overall Children and Families redesign that Margaret and the team are currently taking forward. Additional funding from Inverclyde Council as part of the budget process is helping with this review. We also have the use of non-recurring pension monies to assist with the smoothing of the Children and Families budget, and we're using this to help us within the overall budget in the bottom line. We're showing this funding under the corporate director line for transparency. Also, partially offset the underspends we've had in some of the other areas, the LD and assessment and care management budgets, which is helping the bottom line. The next section highlights the HSCP's progress to date in the achievement of its in-year agreed savings. And as you can see, we've made good progress in this, and the IGA agreed met in December there, and we approved further BER releases for 6 weeks overall. This obviously won't help for this particular financial year because the actual releases will take place on 1st of April into the next financial year, but it helps bring us back overall towards our financial sustainability. Moving on to the capital section, section 4 shows the current position on the community capital projects, mainly the community hub, which we've shown there. This has already started and gives an update of what we spent to date and the progress made in this particular area. Appendix 5 shows the overall earmarked reserves, and this shows we started the year with £17.144 million and expect to finish the year with £13.116 million based on current projections. As always, appreciate there's a lot involved in this particular report, finances, but happy to take any comments or questions in the meeting.
Thanks very much, Craig. Councillor McKee.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. Obviously, a lot of the information most of them have seen before, because it's like getting the other report. So, I've got 2 questions. Was the first focused on the movement since the last report? Moved in the wrong direction by 139,000 minutes. Which move in the other direction. And the principal reason for that is the movement in learning disabilities, so it would be useful to understand what's behind that movement. The second question relates to the agreed savings, and we touched on the decisions that we've taken around the VER target. Let's say that impact next financial year, this, so it would be useful to understand what is the impact of that £400 saving not being achieved in this financial year on the figures that are in here. And the last question was just around the new community hub, which I believe is making good progress. It's just to see whether we can confirm that we are on target for completing in April.
Thanks very much.
No problem. I'll start with a few of them. I might bring Alan in a couple as well. The first of all is the LD units. You're right, yeah, that's been based on demand over the last couple of periods that we've had. We know that sometimes that kind of sometimes gets worse, sometimes gets better. It's just based on the demand. Please rest assured that's something we're looking at the moment, and we're reviewing that as we're going through. So I don't know, Alan, is there any more on the LD part that you wanted to mention?
No, just as Craig's saying, that as new packages come in, you get these fluctuations. But as Craig was saying, we're continually reviewing and assessing, just to make sure that the support we're given meets the person's need, but is an appropriate support as well. So it's something that the team are constantly working on.
Okay, in terms of the savings, the impact of that's already built into this, as in we expect that we will not make those savings for this year. So that's included in the overall bottom line. However, that has given us a position that we can take out of the new year, so we know that's going to help us with that. Finally, in terms of the new community hub, my understanding is that is on track again. I'll just ask if you give a follow-up there.
Yeah, the hub is still scheduled for April 2026, and then at that point we'll go into a transition period of starting to look at moving the service across. So the the latest feedback I've had from the team is that we're still at that date. So there's no, really it's getting to the completion stage now. Okay, that's good news.
Thanks very much. Councillor Moran.
I find a couple of questions. On the older persons, they said that external care home service designed underspend of 260,000, which is mainly due to the reduction number of providers to give the staffing shortage across the sector. Does that mean that we are not doing because the shortage of staff and the whole, is that the reason for not putting people in there? Or is it because, and if people in there, I take it that there's enough staff to take care of it.
Sorry, is it about the care home, the external care home, or the nursing home?
It's external care, man.
Oh, external home care, so that is about the people that we commission care at home, that it's our external contracts. And actually what we find is that we've built a lot of capacity in our existing service. We have always agreed a mixed model of, and it's sometimes up for debate around delivery, but it's about who are the providers at that given point in time that they're commissioning. And a lot of our providers come in and then they come back off framework. So that's something that Arlene's team is looking at, and we would like to move forward to stabilise that position, because we don't think that we should have an underspend in it, but in terms of our commissioning intentions and how we grow that market for external home care, I think it's a bit of work that we have to do with ourselves and the council around attracting new providers, but we need to give them enough business to make it sustainable.
The other question would be on the pension money. Obviously with the employment contribution, there's a non-recurring say of 3,108,000, and that's going to Children and Family Service to cover that. So as we feel offset, we present over for spending Children and Family Service, right? But that is only for this year. Next year we don't have money, right? So where are we at on these savings? We have quite a substantial sum of money, and I think we need to know where we are on it, because we're going to find it money.
No, absolutely. That has been the focus that we've worked on for the last 6 months to a year. The savings initiatives that we're doing, but you're correct, this is our number one financial challenge on that side of things, is being able to find savings to address this particular loss of income, if you want to say. So that forms part of the overall £7 million gap which I reported through the IGIP over the last couple of months. We are working towards that, and we've presented a recent update of where we are with that. So we're on track at the moment for doing that. We are obviously waiting on what's the outcome of today for the Scottish Government budget announcement, and then we'll take that forward, and we'll be able to present that back to the IGIP and also Scrutiny panel, our particular savings. But it's a very good question, and it is on main risk at the moment from the finance side of things. But it's certainly something as an SNP and an IGIP we've been working on pretty extensively over the last couple of months.
Yeah, I mean, the retail the service, which I think we need anyway, but at the end of the day, we have to focus it. We don't get money to buy it all the time, you know. If we're redesigning service, then we should see some sort of results, reduction in this window spending to make it sufficient.
Okay.
Yeah, so we are seeing bits of it. We're seeing at our front door a reduction in families that are coming in statutory services. But children's and families are quite a complex area. It takes time to show the full effect around the changes. So we've only recently brought in our third sector partner to do the intensive, to do the demand avoidance. So to get young people earlier so that they don't go into expensive placements. So they just started in December. And we are the first for this organisation. It's the first time that they've been co-located with statutory services, because so the relationships will be formed really, really quickly. And also we're in the midst of our fostering campaign, and we're going to be looking at around February, March to go out there and encourage more foster carers to come forward. The good news is we're retaining foster carers. Last year we weren't. We were getting seen foster carers leaving. So some of the initiatives that we've put in place are showing benefit, but it's a very, very slow. It will be a slow change around it, because in the meanwhile, we've still got the demand that's coming in for young people, for children that are at risk, and we still have a statutory duty to make sure that we safeguard children who require protection. So it's not that we can just turn the tap off, but we are seeing benefits in the system, but it takes time. And that's why we've included the overspend into the saving for the HSCP. If children's services was in balance, that saving wouldn't come in. And as a health and social care partnership, we see the totality of the responsibilities around a risk. It's a risk-based decision making that we make, and children's services remain, and the volume shows our greatest risk in how we manage.
Certainly, that's good news, I mean, folks are getting the book, I know we know what they do, but I mean, going back in the day, quite a lot of young people had to go outside the sector, they were paid private companies an awful lot of money and they were costing to quite honest, probably still are, but we thought we could do some stuff to sell for money to build a school up instead of giving it to them. I don't think they get success, but it was there to try and keep young people in the community that was about. So I don't know if that people have an education issue, but certainly we do. I think the magnitude done is fine, and I do, but it's something we need to keep an eye on, because if we don't, then it could be a lot of serious financial problems.
Thanks very much, Councillor Moran. Councillor Jackson.
Thanks. It's not just from my main reading of this, if you can bear with me. Just on the reserves, council delegated reserves was 5.998 million. In smoothing reserve is 3.113 million. 321, children, families, residential nursing and living disabilities. We said we're going to overspend. Is this overspend? Does this come from this smoothing reserve, 3.1 million? As I said, I don't know what was it in there for that, and I know I'm probably making this wrong. We have a smoothing reserve of 3.193 million.
What did you say it was 3 point? Which point was it you were saying about things like that?
So if you look at 1.1, there's a smoothing reserve of 3.193 million. Children, families, residential nursing and learning disabilities, 3.3.1. As I mentioned, of really reserves are needed. We have a smoothing reserve for that. Is that correct? Would you get that yet? Sorry for
No, not at all.
So the money which would come if there's an overspend in these, does this come from this smoothing reserve of 3.1 million?
Yep, you're
Absolutely. That's fine. I didn't know it's a separate reserve for that would come from this 3.1 million.
Yeah, to answer the question, yes, we do have specific smoothing reserves for specific things, and you're correct, that one would come from that one, yes.
Have you got any idea of these three, the kind of estimate if the impact it's going to have on this smoothing reserve? Because the disabilities is traditionally challenging.
For this particular area, I would expect it to have no impact on it, because the overall impact on the IGIBs are £300,000 underspend at the moment, so we would not be looking to take those smoothing reserves at the moment when the overall position for the IGIB is an underspend. We have them there, but it's mainly if we were to go into an overspend collectively. On this basis, we're not in that position yet, so I wouldn't be looking to go any further and take any more from that.
Okay, so the spend from this 3.193 million is identified 344,000.
Yes, that was one time.
Okay. Thanks, it's just reminding of it.
Sure.
Thanks very much, Councillor Jackson. I think that's a legacy, like Councillor Moran, isn't it? That like.
Oh, it's not
Yeah,
really-
no, that's fine. No, thanks. Yeah,
Good enough.
no. Thanks. For those responses, Craig, and I think then that's all it's left to say. We're to note the projected current year revenue outturn, note the current projected capital position, and note the current reserves position. Yeah, okay. Thanks very much. So that takes us on to item number 4, and it's back to Craig for the annual accounts and annual report. Thanks, Craig.
Thank you very much for your share. This is the annual accounts and purpose of this report to show the scrutiny panel the accounts from and the report from the external auditors for the 24-25 accounts that went to the IGIB in November. We haven't previously brought this before, but we think going forward in good practice, it's good to bring this also as well. The annual accounts highlight an overall underspend of £34,000 at year end and total reserves carried forward of 17.144 million. This is referenced regularly in the updates I give to each panel. The overall conclusion of the external auditors was that there were no recommendations to be made in the financial statements and concluded that the financial statements gave a true and fair view. I wanted to take this opportunity to highlight some of the comments that independent auditors have made in the report. First of all, on the scope and responsibilities, there should be an unqualified opinion, and there are no matters identified which were required to be reported upon. On the materiality and summary of the risks, they concluded we would not identify any instances of overriding management controls, and management had reverted to fraud risk from income and expenditure in the financial statements. They also concluded that expenditure was completely accurate. On the financial sustainability, they concluded that the IGIB have a medium-term financial plan that takes into account appropriate scenario planning. They also concluded that IGIB had a reserve strategy in place, and this was regularly monitored. This was done through the IGIB. On the vision, leadership and governance section, it concluded that appropriate measures were in place, and they had a 3-year strategic plan, and the annual governance statement is reviewed and approved by the board ahead of being published. They also highlighted that we issue an annual performance report on an ongoing basis. In the best value section, concluded that the IGIB has effective arrangements in place in relation to seeking best value. Finally, in the recommendation section, there were no new recommendations added to the list. Personally, it's the first time I've actually seen that in the IGIB. Overall, we feel this was a really good report. We feel we're proud of it as a senior management team and an IGIB. We're happy to take any questions the members might have.
Thanks, Craig. That's great to hear. It was a really good report. It feels a bit like Bibs and Parents Night. They are bringing back that news, but no, that's great. Councillor McCabe.
Yeah, I suppose that the report not have any recommendations. It's very positive. I just had one curious question to take us to what date the accounts were actually signed off, because obviously we've had challenges over the years in terms of essential, but not just with the IGP, but obviously councils as well, achieving the 30th September deadline. So based on this, if it wasn't achieved, I suppose the challenge I presented to the auditors at our council meeting is, are we ever going to get back to the point of achieving the 30th of September deadline number? So I'm just curious at what date it signed.
So, to answer your question, you're correct. It was in November. It was the IGIB. I'd love to say off the top of my head, I remember the exact date of it, but it was about the middle of November.
I think I saw 17th.
17th. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's a fair point. We are very much under the control of the auditors around that side of things. We had our accounts ready, we had our figures ready, we had the background ready well in July. So it's very much, and I think accounts with similar issues as well over the last number of years. But going forward, I'm happy to work with the auditors about getting this right.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Curley.
Yeah, it's just a question of clarity on page 32. The report, it's got all the sort of the indicators, and it's got a table that sort of like has the average point of directions. I'm just wondering, as people reading this, is that correct, or should it just be one arrow in one box and another arrow opposite it in another box?
I think just 2 seconds, I think people are finding that
Page
page.
step 2 is what page 5.
So these are the national. Years.
Yes, and it's got a trend is improving, moving in the right direction, but it's got 2 arrows in the box.
So in terms of according to Craig, they've stayed the same. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's what I mean, if it stayed the same, it's the same position.
Yeah, that's been 2 points.
Yeah.
But we've got another one for the point of these ones.
So you're talking about the
Okay,
ones
sorry.
that are supported at home and who agree they're supported to live this independently. It's possible
No.
because that's a downward trajectory.
I know, but it's well, it doesn't really.
No, I get part.
I don't really add anything to it.
Okay.
Okay.
Are you wanting us to take
Well,
that potentially away?
Just because we get to get back clarification, I can take it there if it's a bleeding trend or a thing trend. It could be a good if it's pointing one way and a good if it's pointing the other way. But the sort of it doesn't really give you that sort of description because the arrows can be. You don't really know what's good or bad.
So that comes down to the definitions that we have to put in place. So we're happy to take that off table and happy to talk to you, Councillor Curley, about it. I have some challenges about the national outcomes data because it was done at the time and presented, and it doesn't. There's so much variations around how people present that information. But we'll go away, and if there's anything in particular that you're kind of would like more explanation, just let us know.
Yeah, so thanks, Councillor Kelly.
It's just because I've always come to it as sort of fresh on, and I do apologise, but it's just the fact that just look to try and see if it's just not that.
You need a key somewhere to tell you about those different arrows mean.
But maybe a bit more discussion on the key.
So I just having a look at this, and that's sometimes it's really good to get fresh eyes because we look at this on a regular basis. You're absolutely correct. I think that's a typo. I think the 2 arrows going up the way and 2 arrows going down the way. It's just an error that's actually in that, but we'll sort that.
Right, thank you very much.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, so we'll take that away and check, and maybe you're able to just let us all know about that, Craig, then following on. Thanks very much. Councillor Jackson.
It's just on the report. It's within the report, it says we've got 11.19 million pound, and we got between 25 to 30. And I'm looking at the reserves deficit. It says nearly 2.5 million. Suppose would I like to assume that this deficit and the 2.5 million between the deficit that we are going to be looking at using more reserves to fund the gap. The reserves will start appearing quite rapidly.
Okay, through yourself, in terms of what we're doing around the actual savings, do you know what we're looking at 2-year funding gap at this particular moment? At this moment in time, we have developed savings. We are doing our absolute most to minimise the use of any reserves that we've got for this. So I don't want to say 100% that we won't be using the reserves for this position, but certainly I'm comfortable with what we've got at the moment in terms of reserves. That will help us and subsidise the particular savings we're going to be putting forward. But our main aim is to generate enough savings initiatives so we don't actually have to use the reserves.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Okay, so that's great. Thanks for the questions and comments. So just to note the content of the annual report. I can yeah, it's Councillor Curley, that's your light's still on, I think that, yeah, sorry, thanks. So to know the content of the report, and we'll just get a wee bit of clarification at a later date about that type. So thanks very much. Agenda item 5 is the self-evaluation activity in justice social work. And Margaret, you're going to talk us through that. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Rowena. And I have a declaration that my apologies from my Justice Service Manager Gail Hughes today, and also I have Stephen Rankin, Strategic Link Inspector for the Care Inspectorate, sitting next to me also today, so no pressure. Anyway, I'll proceed. So this report is really building an initial report that came to Scrutiny panel in October 2024 to advise of the Care Inspectorate's intention to undertake a national self-evaluation of justice social work in Scotland. And this report today is really to get into a bit more detail of the findings of the self-evaluation that was undertaken. And I'll come to that, but it is important to say this is not, forgive me if I'm stating the obvious, but this is not an inspection of Inverclyde Justice Services. This was an anonymised self-assessment, self-evaluation that all 32 local authorities had to submit to the Care Inspectorate. And from that, the Care Inspectorate, through their report, which is attached, highlighted the thematic findings across Scotland. But clearly, from an Inverclyde point of view, our self-assessment and responding to that evaluation and the questions framed from the Care Inspectorate is what we're interested in, and that's what I'm feeding back today in particular. So the self-evaluation focused on the performance and the quality assurance measures, as I said, in the context of justice social work across Scotland, to demonstrate the supervision and support offered to people on community sentences, ensuring that that is of a high quality. The review focused on the National Strategy for Community Justice, reflecting the importance of justice social work being able to evidence that high quality support and supervision to those on community supervision. Earlier inspection activity that triggered this national thematic review had highlighted that there were some inconsistencies across authorities in terms of the format and frequency of performance reporting. So the actual self-assessment in Inverclyde and the evaluation phase took place during September and November of 2024. And that was quite a significant piece of work in which each local authority had to look at key justice outcomes and look at key areas and really unpack where we saw our strengths, but also look at areas for development and improvement. And the key areas were around performance, quality and outcomes. And you'll see what the report does is it details the local picture and benchmarks that with the national picture. And the overall headline is that we certainly were able to demonstrate strengths in Inverclyde. So, for example, around performance, the local self-assessment and evaluation exercise did identify strengths around a well-developed quality and performance service review framework that was enabled, that was mature, and in terms of the comprehensive data set driving improvement across the service. And so much so that that is an area that was highlighted and through some of the broader National Justice Social Work Scotland subgroups, and an area that we've been asked to share with other areas in terms of ongoing developing practice, because it was a mixed picture nationally. In terms of quality at a local level, we do have a range of quality assurance activity, and that was identified and highlighted in the self-assessment. But what was noted was that a structured quality assurance framework that is planned could be enhanced, and that's work that we're certainly been developing. And of course, that sat completely in sync with the national picture, so there's no outlier here in any way. In terms of outcomes, the service highlighted that at local level, significant progress had been made in terms of identifying strategic priorities and outcomes. And we, of course, highlighted at that time the Community Justice Outcomes Improvement Plan, and of course the Health and Social Care Partnership Strategic Plan, with an outcome and improvement and priority area in the justice part of the service and for our community. So again, it recognised whilst the service has developed its own needs review tool to support this, and we have certainly focused on outcomes through some of our strategic planning. We could always develop that and do more. And again, that was a challenge nationally as well. The report also makes comments more nationally on key organisational drivers that help with performance, quality and outcomes in justice services. And as colleagues and members will know, that is about the culture of learning, the culture of improvement, leadership, governance, knowledge, expertise and resources, and a self-assessment without, you know, blowing our own trumpet here. We have great assurance through all our governance assurance processes around that. 3.9 highlights the local areas that we are going to and we have been focusing on since that time. We're looking at refreshing our quality and performance service review. We are looking at, we always have a close eye on workloads and a capacity, and we are looking at building that broader quality assurance piece so that it's not just about data and numbers, which is important, and we've evidenced our strength in that area, but continuing to build voice, lived experience, feedback, and linking that with the outcomes of someone who's in the justice service, stabilising their life and, of course, reducing reoffending. There is national activity ongoing through Social Work Scotland Justice Standing Committee, and there's a key subgroup, and the service manager Gail Hughes is very much part of that subgroup, feeding into highlighting locally where we are, but also feeding into national developments. So that really hopefully gives an overview of that self-assessment, where we are locally, where we sat nationally, some of the strengths, the areas that we have been taking forward and will continue to take forward. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much, Margaret, and that's good for us to get that report. And as you say, Gail wasn't able to be here today, but we know we get relatively regular reports from Gail on justice social work and also community justice work in the community. So that's good to see that national picture today. Councillor McCabe.
Yeah, Mr. Rankin, the police have always got a positive attitude towards external challenge and scrutiny, so we welcome this report, and obviously it's helps us move in the right direction in terms of improving. Absolutely, we are committed to continuous improvement. It's just to understand, I suppose, how progress is going to be reported on. Obviously, typically you get action plans and they appear somewhere on the reported. Just in terms of this work, how will that be reported through the system, so we, I suppose, as members of the scrutiny panel and the IGB can be assured that actually these actions will be completed?
Mm-hmm. So the work of the Justice Service in terms of governance is our chair feeds into a number of governance routes. So the work is reported at the initial level through ongoing discussion at our SMT, our senior management team. I now chair the Community Justice Partnership, and there is now a lens on performance and improvement and being data-led and curious about outcomes and impact. So the Community Justice Partnership has a lens on this work as well, although that, as the members will know, has a much broader remit around prevention and stopping reoffending, but also what's working well within the justice system to contribute into that agenda. We also have all the strategic reporting linked to the Health and Social Care Strategic plan, and there are justice deliverables within that plan that we feed back through that route. And of course, this work and the work of community justice goes right up to the Alliance, as members and colleagues will know. So there is from directly to myself as Head of Justice Service to Community Justice Partnership, SMT, into the Health and Social Care Partnership governance routes, and right up to the Alliance. There is mechanisms to be making sure that we know how good we are and where we need to improve, just in the same way as the other side of my service in terms of children's services. And we should always be inspection ready as well. The Care Inspectorate, they haven't been inspecting and locally justice services. They have done this very significant piece of work, but there will come a time where they will also come out locally as well to look at local justice services. So lots and lots of mechanisms there so that we can answer that question and to use your own words, have a continuous improvement mindset.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Moran.
Aye, thanks, Margaret. Right, it says in the report that any updates are often outdated, certain reports of international terms of staff time and expertise. These challenges become more pressing with Scottish Government attempt to shift the balance from custody to community and the range of community options. Mine is social justice service. How robust is our service to deal with any increase in more people coming to us? So the print service, they come to the service. How robust will we to deal with this increase, which the Scottish Government says might be coming our way?
Sorry, could you clarify what section of the report you're?
Given on page 107, you come down
Just
to.
Oh, right, yeah.
The Scottish Government Justice Analytical Service being valued. So I'm reading from the last paragraph.
Okay, that's.
Any updates of it?
Yeah. Is it about, it's about sort of community-based solutions, isn't it?
Well,
Instead of custodial sentences, I think.
Aye.
And are we ready for that?
Yeah.
Is that I'm paraphrasing, is that right?
I'm just going with word to word.
Yeah, that sentence jumped out at me as well, that I think it was saying about Scottish Government looking to, instead of potentially
I've got the balance. The balance of culture to community.
Yeah.
And then the community option, minor social justice service increases.
But as we know, there are big challenges to those sort of community solutions as well.
Send it for you.
Yeah, sorry, Jonathan's going to respond to that. Sorry, thanks.
As a chief social worker.
Yes.
So I suppose, Councillor Moran, thanks for your question. I think that this sentence in the Care Inspectorate report actually reflects quite a long-standing shift from custody to community. And when I think back to my own career as a criminal justice social worker, there's always been that intention to try and shift sentencing options away from the overuse of custody, particularly for shorter sentences. And we've seen that work happen nationally over the last 10 years. What that does mean is that community-based justice services need resource transfer to come from the custodial estate to support community-based services. I suppose nationally, as part of the Chief Social Work Officers Group, I've been aware of work locally and nationally in terms of developing those evidence-based programmes to really strengthen community-based alternatives to custody, and also at a very local level, how it ties in even with Maxine's earlier presentation about changes to homelessness services, because it's not just about community options like a community payback order and unpaid work. It's actually that more holistic approach to reducing the risk of people reoffending, but it is that ongoing journey, I suppose, of justice services in Scotland away from using custody as we did before and into the community. So the assumption that sentencers will not sentence anybody to 12 months or less in prison unless there's a really clear reason why. And also even within youth justice, moving away from remand and custodial sentences to deployment and instead out to the secure estate. So I suppose the point that you've highlighted in the Care Inspectorate report is really well made, but it goes, I suppose, even further. And it means then that the systems and the processes need to keep up with that as well. I think for Inverclyde, we're really fortunate that we've got our youth justice service and we've got our courts and our prison in the local area as well. So that means that we can strengthen that transition from custody to community by virtue of the fact that we've got a prison-based social work team locally as well, working with the community team in Margaret Service. But that's really just some initial context.
So if we're going to get more of this community service, be like order, it's a bigger challenge on the service, and they're robust. What we find out, we're really struggling here financially to run the services. Is there any extra money coming from the Scottish Government for this particular service?
The way that Justice Services is funded is ring-fenced annual funding. So Scottish Government directly fund Justice Social Work Services in all 32 local authorities, and they base that funding calculation on custody and community-based sentences, but we provide a detailed annual aggregate return, so they're able to use that data on an annual basis, but they also forecast that over a longer period of time. Where we've seen initiatives around trying to reduce, for example, short-term custodial sentences in favour of community-based alternatives like community payback, then there has been resource provided at national level. But I suppose the analytical services section of Scottish Government around justice is extremely well established, and they're extremely focused on quite a defined area of data, and that means that the local returns that we've got are very accurate, but also nationally it gives us as chief social work officers that confidence about the data that isn't always consistent across public services, but for justice social work certainly it gives us a much greater degree of confidence in terms of the data and how that's used to be able to fund custodial and community services.
Thanks. It's good because it's good to get that context, obviously, from Margaret as head of justice and yourself, Jonathan, in your chief social work officer position. And I think you mentioned there, Jonathan, although Inverclyde wasn't selected as one of the areas which the kind of overall review focused on, we do work in quite a unique context here because we've got the court, we've got the prison in a bad state of repair, we've got the custody suite as well in a similar condition. So the social work staff are working in challenging physical conditions and against quite a unique backdrop as well. So yeah, it's good to bring that into focus. But I think Margaret wants to say a few words, and then I think we'll be ready to
a few words. Thank you. Just to add, and what Jonathan was saying to social work officer about the aggregate return, going back to the self-evaluation report, that highlighted a real strength in our data and the accuracy and the data that we were providing there. The other thing I would want to say is we have very good, building on the court in particular, we have very good relationship with the court. There's meetings with the chief social work officer and the sheriff. There's meetings, there's a regular meeting. I was sitting in a meeting with the Scottish Community Justice Lead and our Justice Lead, and they were talking about a partnership working in this space, particularly with the court. And just the national lead was really interested in that and highlighting that potentially as an example of good practice, and keen to learn more about that, again, to support the national learning in this area. But the other thing I would add to the question is that interface with the Community Justice Partnership, and what was said by colleagues earlier, that we have a mature Community Justice Partnership in Inverclyde. And if we think of the individual, the actual offending is one part of the picture. So we have at the table that broad community partnership, be it health, mental health, be it addiction, be it housing, homelessness, third sector, a huge part of that partnership to keep the community-based work and the community-based support as a priority, because most of us would agree with the policy shift and change that is happening in this area. Outcomes, it goes back to outcomes, are better. But any increase in demand in this area, any pressure because of the unique funding that's set up through justice, that does, and the data collected, there is that route back to be making sure that any issues there are reported back nationally. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
A question was, are we going to capacity and finance to do that?
Yes. Yes.
You have? That's great.
Yeah, sorry, yeah, I was saying yes, we have, that's for Margaret's answer. Okay, so yeah, we've just to note the context of this report. Thank you. On to item number 6, Jonathan's going to give us an update on Scottish Social Work Partnership, the National Social Work Agency. Thanks, Jonathan.
Thank you, Convener. For yourself, this is a brief report, and I suppose that is an indicator of it's a very early report on the scrutiny panel for 2 constructs that have still to take shape. But they really come from the work over the last 5 years through the National Affairs Service and really thinking about social work profession in terms of how to galvanise and strengthen them nationally. So the first one is the Scottish Social Work Partnership, which will be led by the National Social Work Agency, also the Social Work Scotland, and that will launch in June of this year. And the focus there is very much about ensuring skilled, supported and sustainable social work workforce. So it will include social workers as well as paraprofessionals, social work assistants, residential workers, etc. And the focus of that collaborative partnership really is about shaping the learning, the leadership and planning for future workforce across all social work sectors. There is a range of consultation and engagement activity on the go at the moment to help inform a 3-year strategic plan for the partnership by the time it launches in June, and that will be subject to agreement by ministers and COSLA leaders. And the expected focus there is around social work education and learning, our workforce planning, and also professional governance and leadership. In addition to the 3 key leads, there's a range of members who will attend the meetings of the Social Work Partnership, and they will include third sector representatives, as well as the Care Inspectorate, the SSC, and the Mental Welfare Commission as well. The second development, I suppose, is the further evolution of the role of the Chief Social Work Advisor to Scottish Government, held by Owen Colvin up until December. And really the product of the Care Reform Act put that role on a statutory footing and included within it duties to provide national leadership, coordination and support for the social work profession. So that means that this new National Social Work Agency has been developed as a Scottish Government agency and will launch in March 26. So we're expecting that to be launched on World Social Work Day. And it will be led by the National Chief Social Work Advisor, who's got a number of responsibilities, including advising ministers on policy relating to social work and public protection, as well as preparing an annual report on the state of social work services and the social work workforce. So the Chief Social Work Advisor will have the dual role of Chief Executive of the National Social Work Agency and be accountable to ministers. They're currently working up a 1-year corporate plan for professional advisors are in the process of being appointed to the National Social Work Agency, and the focus there is expected to be around leadership and support, as well as championing social workers and social work students, advising on policy and helping to align national policy that affects the delivery of social work services, as well as linking with the Social Work Partnership with education and workforce needs. So the 1-year corporate plan is expected later this year to guide a number of key strategic objectives to help the agency get on its feet. And we have established between Chief Social Work Officers and the National Social Work Advisor monthly meetings for the rest of this year to help ensure that we have that ongoing dialogue and to help shape how we engage, but also how we can shape that corporate plan and the priorities for the future. So it may be helpful for Scrutiny panel members to request a further update report from you later this year once we've got the 1-year corporate plan from the National Social Work Agency and the 3-year strategic plan from the Scottish Social Work Partnership. And by then we've had the chance to consider what it means for us in Inverclyde. Okay. Would you take any questions?
Thank you, Jonathan. Councillor McCabe.
It's always good to see Scotland taking another climb with another. I think your part of the answer to my question was, in a sense, was how is this agency going to engage with the employers and the principal employers of social workers in Scotland at councils, and I suppose also how this agency will fit into the Scottish Social Work Partnership as well. Are they going to have a seat at the table there as well? And in terms of that partnership, how will we as an authority seek to sort of, I suppose, influence that partnership, and presumably there are opportunities both at officer level and at like the member level through COSLA to sort of inform the work with the partnership.
Thank you, Councillor McCabe. I suppose in terms of engagement, there are a range of engagement opportunities for practitioners and for managers across Scotland at the minute to join online discussions about the development of these plans, both the corporate plan for the agency and also the partnership as well. I think nationally, the vehicle that we got through we've had established monthly meetings with the previous Chief Social Work Advisor to Scottish Government, so it's good to see that the new agency has set that commitment off on a monthly basis. So I suppose from a professional governance point of view, that's an opportunity to help shape and influence their priorities. I know that John McDonald, the new Chief Social Work Advisor, is keen to come around as many of the local authority areas as possible for the launch. Now, I don't think that would be entirely possible between now and the 17th of March, but there will be a range of opportunities in person and online for us at local level to engage more broadly with the agency. And I suppose that the local influence or the influence on local authority is a key part of my role, both within that national network, but also having those relationships with some of the people within the National Social Work Agency to ensure that the perspective on Inverclyde is clearly understood. And I suppose really to highlight and to continue to highlight some of the achievements that we've been able to develop over the last few years locally, but also what the ongoing challenges are for the profession. So I suppose it's at local and national level, but it's very much a wait and see situation, but with a lot of expectations on the National Social Work Agency to be able to deliver that national leadership that suits local needs.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Moran.
Thanks, Jonathan. I mean, I'm a bit of a dreamer, I suppose, but I think the outcome of this would be see the creation of a level playing field for all social workers. So here there might be goodness stuff because we don't pay the same rates as they do the bigger authorities. So if you're going to read that, I try to emphasise that I don't know people to say, I mean, if I started a policeman in Edinburgh, I could say money the policeman in Aberdeen or a nurse. So if it's possible, we could get a level playing field on what social worker care conditions are. It's certainly a way back forward and really help some essentially we are here with shops or social workers. So hopefully we get some outcomes of that.
Thanks very much, Councillor Moran. Obviously, we might not be a level playing field, but we've got some very attractive opportunities for social workers in Inverclyde, haven't we? Like Grow Your Own, support for masters and support for early career social workers that are really helping our recruitment and retention challenges. But I'll hand over to Jonathan there.
Thank you, Councillor. You stole my thunder. But
Sorry.
Sorry. It is exactly those examples that we've had some dialogue with other colleagues elsewhere who've been really interested about what we've done and the impact that it's had in terms of being able to grow our workforce and retain it. I'm really conscious that as well as bringing people in to Inverclyde, it's about how we hold on to them and how we develop them. So one of the local priorities for me over the next year is about how we develop our learning and development resource for social work staff. But the level playing field, I suppose, has been an issue since that came to an end in, I think it was 1999-2000, whenever we did all pay the same nationally. And I can remember sitting in the room. Was that for a good second? When we qualified, we all had a similar salary and then all became quite competitive between the new local authorities. And that has always been a challenge, that we are in competition with each other from a salary point of view. I suppose the feedback from our recruitment exercises here is that money is one aspect, but it's only one aspect of recruiting people in. And I think that helps us in Inverclyde to consider a more diverse offer, really, to support the workforce and retain them. But again, the national discussions about terms and conditions are not going to go right with the creation of the National Social Work Agency.
Yeah, I think if you're John, it's not just social workers, you know, because national forums and carers, we all know that people for Edinburgh saying, you know, they get votes from East Lisbon, but they get more money in Edinburgh, North Perth, South Perth, you know. So it's not just social workers, it's just probably a lack of people there, so you have to be agreement to get. So I'd like to see a level playing field social work.
Thanks. Kate, you were wanting to say a few words?
I just wanted to add, and not just focusing on social work, because social workers don't constitute the majority of our workforce within social work and social care. And just to advise you that there's a level of curiosity from the Scottish Government about the steps that we've taken to look at reviewing our social care workforce, looking at our remuneration of our social care workforce, which is probably one of the highest in Scotland as it stands, or the West Coast, and to look at the development that we're putting into that social work workforce, because there's a recognition for areas where there is significant poverty and inequality. If you pay social care much more, you see the benefits within your own local area. So we'll certainly be influencing that debate, and I think we're in a good place to do that because we've done it, okay, and we've seen the benefits, because at the point before we did do that, our delayed discharges weren't as good as what we are, and what keeps the system going is our social care workforce. And you and I had that debate yesterday, Councillor Moran, and not the nursing home sector, it's the care home sector, that our social care sector that makes the difference. So I'm sure that Jonathan, and if I get the opportunity to be invited to Scottish Government, which I don't really ever get the opportunity, I'll be happy to kind of look at what we're going to.
Thanks very much for that, Kate. That's really interesting, and great to point out as well about making sure that we recognise the importance of social care workforce, not just social workers. And if you get invited to Scottish Government, you can pass on Councillor Kate's appreciation of yet another Quango as well. Councillor Jackson.
I'm glad that Kate and Robert mentioned that about the kind of the workforce, because we've sat here over the last couple of years and got reports on the National Care Service and I don't know if this is an attempt to salvage something from the National Care Service, because the National Social Work Agency was going to be part of the National Care Service, and within that they would be in charge of workforce planning. And as they say, a lot of the devil's in the detail, and we've got a lot of reports coming forward on this. But very early on, as I say, the devil will take detail in it. You get National Social Work Agency have now removed social care workers from this. They are not included, not social workers, social care workers and occupational therapists, they are not included. So they are now, as opposed to the National Care Service, they will now be not part of any national bargaining or terms and conditions. And again, given the demands and the pressure on workforce planning on social care, the turnaround, the people relying on those, the social care workers in the care homes, are now not going to be part of this. They will not be part of any national bargaining, no terms and conditions, and again they are going to be classed as a second class workforce. And that was the whole point of the National Care Service, to bring in some parity with their colleagues, and now again they're let down and they've been removed. And I think it's a damn shame that again these workers have been treated this, and it's very early on, and we're yet to see what else is going to come forward. So I just think it's an opportunity in this, and I don't want to put my chief social worker on the spot here, that it does seem as if you've marched up a hill back down again. National Care Service has been scrapped, and now we've got this to deal with.
Thanks very much, Councillor Jackson. Yeah, if I could just note your comments at this point, but I appreciate you making them. Okay, so I don't see any more lights on, no more comments or hands up on screen. So we just ask you to note the establishment of social work partnership and social work agency, and I think Jonathan suggested requesting the update report, and I'm sure we would welcome that report. Yeah. Thanks very much. And that takes us on to item number 7. So as we move into private session,